So we have come to the end of this retouching part of the tutorial, and I want you to congratulate yourself. You have been sitting through hours and hours and hours of me talking you through my process, and I'm sure it's been a long haul, and I hope it has been worth it for you. It's been really gratifying for me to retouch these pictures for sure, as they are a fulfillment of not only big ideas but also some sort of healing process for me, describing these pictures for the emotions that I've been through for the last half year to a year. So that said, I want to dive into the very last assignment. In the first three, we focused quite a bit on color, and the composite pieces have been in some ways simpler when it comes to the light quality. Both for the open vista and for the crash, there was just open shade, and it didn't really mean too much where you face the person or the subject that you're photographing, right? It could be facing left, right, east, west. Didn't quite matter because it was an overcast light quality, or before the sun came up or after it went down. Now for this, we have to take into place the light source as well. When you look at this picture, you see the sun to the right, the people, slightly to the left in the frame. And what I often do when I have this situation is to put my right hand at the sun and my left hand at where I want the talent to be, and that will give me an angle. In this case, it's about, not quite 90 degrees. You got to get pretty close to the screen, obviously, because you know that the sun is, pretty much to the right, not all the way to the right, so not all the way a 90-degree angle, but let's say it's 60 degrees maybe. We shouldn't really put a degree number to this, but you know what I mean. Put your hand towards the sun, put your other hand towards the talent that you see I put in there, and you will have a good indicator about where the sun needs to be in relationship to your foreground element. So when you photograph your foreground element, it could be train tracks, it could be people walking there, it could be just a beautiful old farmer standing there. Man, it could be cool to have some building in there, someone's working on it. There's so many beautiful things that you can put into this image. So find your story, obviously, as part of the assignment. Find the people or the place or whatever you want to photograph. Find what that is. Find your story. Then set the camera at the height that my camera was when I photographed the landscape. Then you have to think about the light direction. We haven't talked about this too much in the previous composites, not in conversations as much either. That was more a dappled light with different sources everywhere. So there was 3-4 sources there that you could sort of play with, and you can put someone on that bed without it being too scientific, about where you put the main light source. In this case, there's only one sun and there's no other light source. So you have to put the sun in the same position as this picture as you are doing for your picture. That's the only way you're going to create a seamless composite to this. So in the prerequisites, we talked about the light quality. It has to be the same. You watched me shoot this. You watched me talk about the overcast haze that we got. You watched me talk about the silk that I wanted to put up. I'm going to repeat this. The silk was there to extend the window that we had to photograph the people. Now, the landscape, we talked about this. When the sun just crests the horizon, or the trees in this case, we get a really soft palette, a painterly palette on the background. We can shoot and cheat this a little bit, right? We could photograph the people about an hour before the sun sets, but an hour before it's going to be crisper. The direction will be almost the same, different with just a few degrees of the sun being a little higher, but it will definitely be crisper. It will have more contrast. So we put a silk up to soften that contrast and expand the window of time that we could photograph our talent. This picture, if I were to do this in camera, I would only have a few minutes to photograph the talent. It's not enough time. All the practice, all the stuff that we go through, to get to a good place when it comes to hair and the motion and the dress and all this stuff, it takes time. So for this, go out, find your subject matter, line it up with the sun being similar to what you see in the screen. Put your hand towards the people, put the hands towards the sun, and say, this is my difference between where the people are and where the sun is, and line that up. It's really, really important. So that's assignment number 1. Make sure to match the light quality of the people that you're putting in to the background light. Now for the past 2 retouches, we talked a lot about the color temperature. This one is quite different than the other 2. right? One we made all green, again, overcast light, green trees. That infused and directed sort of that color palette. On the open vista, we did one blue tone, and then one warmer before the sun came up. This one obviously have that golden light quality, and I want you to embrace that as well. When you put together the background together with me, then apply that color or push it even further, pull it back a bit, try to add your own story to it. But it has to be golden and it has to match the light between background and foreground element. The last assignment that I want to give you in this is to focus on composition. We haven't really talked much about that beyond what we did in the introduction or in the prerequisites. So when you go out and shoot this specific foreground element, I want you to really focus on your composition. How many triangular elements can you create? How many elements can you create that gives you depth, that lead the eye into the picture and then traps it somewhere and it goes from one element to another to another. It doesn't have to be in triangles, even though that's powerful, but make sure that you create elements that will make your eye travel within the photograph. Don't make it flat. Don't just put something in there. Give it volume. Have something travel into the picture. And if you shoot a person, maybe you place another person in the back, or maybe you put a house in the back. Just give something of an element in the background that helps tell, one, the story of the person in the foreground, or give it depth. So for instance, if I photograph just the old man standing here or walking on the tracks, maybe there was a shed back there, or maybe there was a horse back there, or maybe there was another person back there. Then suddenly I created a story with a dynamic between two people, and I created an element which will allow your eye to go between foreground to background and maybe to grass or maybe to sun, and line those up. Think about how to trap the eye of the viewer within your frame. Using it as triangles, super powerful, but it can be other ways as well. I would also encourage you to look at old paintings. The old master painters were so exquisitely good at using triangular compositions. So keep that in mind. Start looking at paintings. It's truly, truly helpful in learning composition. So those are really the two main assignments for this. Make sure you get the light quality right. End of the day, last hour, soften it until it gets really low. Then you have the right light quality to match it into this background. We already talked about the camera heights and all that stuff, the measurements you have for this background. You should be able, with this information, to just do what I did, shoot a plate and lay it beautifully right in there without too much fuss. The second part is focus on the composition. Try to create shapes both in your foreground element and between the foreground element and maybe in second and a third element within this landscape. I had the classic way of using a curve of train tracks which help lead the eye into the picture. And in some ways, it goes into the picture, and if you follow the tracks, where the tracks end, there's sort of like a shadow that leads the eye again back to the old man and then back to Kim the model, down her dress, and then all the way around again. So there's a loop there almost that traps the eye within the photograph. So again, a lot of talking. I do get excited about this stuff. That's the assignment this time. And again, I would have to say I'm truly grateful for you sitting through all these hours of Retouch and listening to me and the assignments. And I cannot wait for us to get together on some webcast and we can talk about what we learned and the differences between what I accomplished and what you guys did and all that stuff. I truly look forward to. So with great, great gratitude, I say thank you for letting me teach you what I know about photography and retouching. Thank you.